Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again today with another interview of one of our mobile home park owners. Today's guest is a big deal. Glad to have him on here. He's got a lot of publicity for being in the space. One of the guys is one of the faces of the industry. He's a mobile home park owner, operator. He's a syndicator. He's got his own podcast. Our guest today, Jefferson Lilly. Jefferson, thanks for coming on.
Ferd, thank you for having me. That's a wonderful introduction. Whatever I'm paying you, I'm doubling it.
Oh, great. I'll put my kids in private school with that.
Yeah, right.
Well, I know a little bit about you, but not enough, and our audience, some of them the same way. So tell us a little bit about you and your background, and then we'll get into some MHP stuff here as well.
Sure. So I've been in the mobile home park business now going on 13 and a half years. I got started back in, actually I first kind of discovered the space back in 2005. I had been working in high tech at a couple of different startups, had kind of been through the dot-com boom and bust. And initially I thought, well, let me buy an apartment building. It'll provide some passive income and smooth out some of my startups, stock options.
Yeah.
And then just in like going to LoopNet and searching on multifamily, and I knew I wasn't going to find anything out here in San Francisco where I live that would cash flow. So I was already looking, in Lubbock, Texas and Peoria, Illinois, whatnot. But just in searching for multifamily, there'd be like, 99 apartment buildings. And again, this was 15 years ago or so, 99 apartment buildings in Lubbock, Texas at an 8 cap, and then one random trailer park at like 12 cap. And I thought, that's absurd. I'm not buying a friggin' trailer park. Are you kidding? I deleted
but the 12 cap caught your eye. I know it.
Yeah, well, it did, but it just sort of seemed, like such an odd thing to buy, and there must be some trick to it. Anyway, probably that 12 cap deal, had a lot of mobile home income in it, and I would not have known that at the time. But anyway, so I went through several of these searches and kept discarding mobile home parks just because it seemed too weird. But then maybe after getting hit over the head, fifth, eighth time, I finally thought, well, mobile home parks do seem to be multifamily, and I assume they, throw off cash flow like an apartment building. Why don't I look into this? And then it clicked pretty quickly, why it's a great little niche. And I kind of built up an unofficial advisory board of about 10 guys that were all in the business. I would run deals by them. I bought books and tapes. I went to seminars. I just started learning about the business specifically, as well as some related things like land trusts and other asset protection that's generic to real estate. But anyway, it took about a year and a half really of kind of education, looking at deals, putting in bids, getting turned down before finally I got a deal bought. That was then. I got interested in the space in late 05. It was early 07 that I actually closed on my first park. All my own money. I was still working a day job. After about a year, transitioned into this, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So anyway, I got into it part by plan and part by dumb luck.
Hey, whatever works, that's great.
Yeah.
A little similar background for me, where I was started a day job and then was at a law firm, and it's like, you know what, I'm making more money on MHP than I am practicing law. I should just start doing MHP full time. And it worked out. Now I do a little bit of both, but I like doing both. I like being in the field. I like being in the deals, underwriting deals, negotiating deals. So it can be a fun space. So interested too. Obviously, when you started out, part time, when you had your day job,
Yes.
how'd you decide to make the leap, and how'd that work? And then as you've grown, tell us about your first hire too. I think that's a concern. I think a lot of my clients have is like, I'm doing everything. I need to have somebody else run the numbers. I need somebody else do the books, but I need to have the books. But I need somebody to do the ads and the Facebook. And I don't mean the first hire like the first park breeder or manager that's showing the units. I mean like from a headquarters operation. I think that's where like, dang, now I'm really bringing on the salary. That's where I think a lot of people get, in my opinion, a lot of people get overworked and because they get nervous because they're afraid to bring on that next person.
Yeah, exactly. So, I would be a far wealthier man if I didn't think I was Superman, right? I spent many years trying to do it all myself. And indeed, if there were an infinite number of hours in the day, I could have done all the accounting and been my own general contractor and put all the ads up on Facebook. And I absolutely could have done absolutely everything. It's just, you know, getting to the point where you realize that it's just about time, and you do need to hire other people to do that. So honestly, that whole first deal and then even my second deal were all me doing most all of the general contracting, asset management type stuff. Those properties did have managers. Again, I'm here in San Francisco. These first couple properties that I bought were still are out in the Oklahoma City, Oklahoma metro.
Okay.
So, so I have now more thoroughly outsourced those, but really kind of the first hire, I would say, other than really like a manager, or of course having any number of contractors, your plumbers and electricians.
Right.
Really, I don't think I made my first hire then until my first fund, which was now about 6.5 years ago or so. And honestly, my partner and I raised some money, bought several parks, and it probably took us about a year into that partnership to realize that, hey, we actually need a controller, somebody to be doing kind of all the basic bookkeeping on up into some payables and receivables. So so that was really it at that point. And that person, of course, just supported the fund, not my two properties. But at that point, I think we had probably 7 or 8 deals under our belt, all averaging about 100 pads. So we got to 700 or 800 pads doing bookkeeping and stuff, all that on our own, which was a mistake. Again, we should not have been supermen. We should have hired, and I've done things differently with my current Park Avenue fund, you know, where I brought on accounting and asset manager people even before having a single deal purchased. Okay. So I guess, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So I wasn't going to let that happen again. But that was it. We were up to 700 to 800 pads before we brought on a controller, and we then got another couple of deals done, and we were at around 1,000 pads or 1,100 pads in that first fund before we hired our first asset manager. Obviously, somebody to oversee the community managers. So those were our first couple of key hires, and we made them too late, but thank heavens we did make them.
That's great. Yeah, I think I hear the same thing from about everybody, that your first hire, your each hire is always a little too late, but you're glad you did. It's always like you resist, but then when you do, you're like, what was I doing beforehand? I mean, and now that I know rent manager, but I'm like, good grief, if I was the one doing rent manager entry, I'd lose my hair. It's just like, you know, it's still much monotonous, tedious work. So like, you want to have, I think, a bookkeeper or a controller is a great first hire. And then, as you get bigger, obviously the asset manager, and because I have somebody on my team that does a combination of entry, bookkeeping, and marketing, and the ads, and does, you know, just kind of general office administration stuff too. It's like, that's so helpful, so valuable. And then obviously at some point, like you said, raise your fund, you got to bring in some equity partners, right? Because you either run out of money, or your wife doesn't let you spend it all in one deal. You know, that's my situation is gone. But tell us a little bit about that next step of how you decided to get into, you know, raise the fund. And is your fund, I'm not familiar with it, is it like a private placement memorandum where you have one deal at a time and you raise capital, or is it you pre-raise $5 million and then you go look for deals?
Yeah. So what I've always done, for better or for worse, has been more the latter, raising funds. Our investors are typically, really all are accredited investors. We're still relatively small. This last Park Avenue fund was about 15.8 million. That's still a little too small for, you know, institutional money. And I think that's fine. I'm not necessarily looking to, you know, raise $100 million just to raise it and charge fees. Frankly, something that makes us kind of different is we charge no fees at all. So we don't raise money just for the sake of raising money and charging, you know, a management fee on it. But yeah, it became pretty clear. Obviously, I bought those first couple of deals that pretty well maxed out my net worth, and I needed to do something else. So so I formed. So actually, my former partner Brad reached out to me just kind of out of the blue and said, "Hey, let's form a partnership and go buy mobile home parks." And it was something I'd been thinking about doing as well. So so we raised our first couple of two funds there as a partnership. Again, what I'm working on now is just me at Park Avenue. But that was really it. And I'll give your listeners some encouraging word. You know, our first deal, we kind of went guardrail to guardrail with investors. By that, I mean, we had a deal lined up, which we still own, and is doing quite well. And we had a guy from Wyoming lined up to finance it. And he had some prior experience in real estate. It was more like sort of McMansion, $1 million fix and flip. Okay. But he had some real estate experience, seemed to be a high net worth guy. You know, he kept asking all the right questions, although somehow he kept repeating them. But this gentleman, we sort of refer to him as Mr. Wyoming. He kept saying he was going to do the whole deal, chewed up a lot of partner time. We got wise that he probably wasn't going to do the deal, at least not the whole deal. Again, we got wise just a little later than we should have, but we started talking to other folks. But ultimately, that prospective investor who was so gung-ho to take down the whole deal himself sent us a one-sentence email just saying, "My wife won't let me do this deal." Wow. He didn't even have the chutzpah to pick up the phone and just tell us.
So he left you at the
one sentence email. Meanwhile, you know, I had sent an email to a former sort of neighbor of mine when I lived in Boston. He lived in the unit above me. We had kept loosely in touch. I sent him an email. We'll call him Mr. Boston. I said, "Hey, if you're still interested in mobile home parks, you know, would love to have you in on this deal. Let me know if you want to talk about it." He texted me back and said, "Okay, I'm in. You know, what's your bank account number?" And I said, "Well, when do you want to talk about the deal?" And he texted me back and said, "No, Jefferson, I'm in. I'm wiring $100,000 in the morning. What is your bank account number?"
That's awesome.
So the next morning, $100,000 showed up from like one email and two text messages. So I've never yet had it as difficult to raise money as Mr. Wyoming. I've never yet had it be quite as easy as Mr. Boston. But just kind of interesting, we went guardrail to guardrail. So it's generally on the whole gotten easier to raise money. Our funds have generally gotten larger. Again, not that size specifically matters that much. You could raise several smaller funds and deploy them in a year, or one bigger one and take 2 or 3 years to deploy. But generally, we've gotten more investor interest. We've got a pretty good track record. Folks are telling other folks. And again, they'll typically invest with us some amount of money. And then before we close the fund and we send out that proverbial train leaving the station email, as the fund closes, then usually the amount of money triples in that last month. For us anyway, it's been about 3x higher, whatever it has been for the preceding 11 months. Anyway, so we're about to launch another fund probably in Q2 of 2021 next year. We'll see how large it is. No right or wrong answers, but it'll be the same. People can invest and then make a subsequent follow on or whatever. Mm-hmm. We'll just see where we end up, and we'll be buying deals all the way through.
All right. Well, that's good stuff, man. Yeah. And definitely at the next level is when you start bringing on investors, and there's pros and cons to that. I've done some of that myself, and sometimes I wish I hadn't, because it's like, oh, now I'm doing all this extra regulatory stuff, and drafting a PPM is a huge pain, and all this stuff. Oh, whatever, it's necessary, right? It's part of the next step of the game. I'm like you. I don't like to charge the asset management fees and all that kind of stuff. I prefer just to do kind of an 8-pref and then a general partner, limited partner split on a deal by deal basis. Sometimes an acquisition fee, sometimes not. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of PPMs, a lot of funds, and it's amazing how many different structures, different hurdles, and waterfalls, and everything. Oh, yeah. There's people ask me sometimes, how do you set this up? I'm like, there's 1,000 scenarios. How do you want to set it up? And what's the ultimate goal? What are you trying to get to for your investors? What are you trying to get to for you? And then we can set it up, one way or another. And we do that. We do PPN for people, but they come to me like as if there's one cookie cutter deal. It's like there's not. And
Right.
if it's a heavy infill or a big infill flip, it's a different pro forma. It's probably a different general partner limit per split than a deal that's right down the fairway that's 95% occupied and market rent. So I think you just continue to look at each investor and each project case by case basis, kind of how I look at it.
Yep, that's very true.
What other I won't take too much of your time, but what other tips or tricks do you have that you could share that our listeners can learn from?
Yeah, I just say, so again, outsourcing is going to be critical. Do it sooner than you're probably comfortable with. Key areas to outsource are accounting, and then everything around marketing, just keeping a presence up on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, of course, Zillow, MH Village, all those. Sometimes you'll have community managers that are skilled enough to do all that marketing, but we've also outsourced some of that. But you probably don't want to be the guy doing that either. And then if you have gotten to the fund level, probably then you need to outsource or at least make a key hire for somebody just reviewing deals and filtering out, for every 10 deals to get down to one that, looks like it might be interesting. And you kind of define what your own internal metrics are around size, cap rate, upside. But we found it's been very good to have people just sourcing and evaluating deals for us, again, just to filter through to get down to the 10% of stuff that might be then worth really digging into. So outsource early and often, probably, but then I would say as soon as you have scale, if you start keeping somebody busy 40 hours a week or somewhat close to that, I'd say, again, you might want to then just bring them in-house as an employee. We found it generally helps when you get up to that level and you're then somebody's total mind share. It's not just like, oh, I found this guy through Fiverr and I do 5 hours a week of marketing for Jefferson, whoever that is. But like you get somebody that's like already busy, 30 something or towards 40, just bring them on. Again, probably as an employee, could be an independent contractor, but just get a relationship with them where they're working for you full time. We found generally you'll get better work. There's just something about, being somebody's real soul focus.
Right. Having a boss.
Yeah. And giving them a sense of that sort of stability. Like, hey, this is, it's not just like some job on Fiverr and I need 5 hours this week and then it's 0 next. Like, you're now our marketing person, our controller, our deal guy. You're now working here full time. And basically, as soon as you can get to that, again, I really advise folks to then try and actually make full-time hires as soon as you reasonably can.
No, I think that's great. I agree. I'm a big fan of bringing people in full time because then it's like they feel like they're part of the team. You don't mind spending the same amount of time investing in them and helping them learn the trade. And then you got, like I said, you're their boss. You get their full attention. So yeah, I've hired 3 full-time people in the last 10 days. Like I'm really trying to do that and just outsource, downsource, all that stuff, and give people you're just the acquisitions guy. Find preliminary underwrite. You catch them. The finance guy's going to cook them, I'll clean them. Let's get this thing all kind of team oriented, and not to be too siloed. I like cross training, all that, but that's definitely good advice. And I've even noticed that with the laborers, maintenance guys, where we first had a park, it was 54 lots. We didn't have enough work. We had like 10 or 15 parkland homes to renovate. We had full-time work for a while for this maintenance guy, but then we ran out of work. And he went and got a roofing gig. Well, then we needed him to fix the toilet or something. He goes, oh, I'm out roofing for the next 3 days. I'll get to it on Saturday. It's like, I need you today. Well, then I got to call a plumber. It's $150 an hour. This guy was 15. So then I realized, okay, we need to buy enough stuff in this trade area to keep this guy busy full time. And that's been our goal. And like right now today, I've got 3 full-time guys, maintenance guys in Kansas City. I sent 2 of them to Illinois today because I'm running out of work. I'm parking homes to my next ones come in. I'm sending to go work on remodeling a duplex that's on a park in some parkland homes in Illinois. Keep them busy. I'll pay them for drive time. I'll put them in a hotel, but then I don't have to go find them again. So if it makes sense for the maintenance, I thought it definitely makes sense too for things like the marketing and the bookkeeping and all that. So definitely seems to be better for team building to be able to tell people I can get you full-time work. Don't go out there looking for jobs. Don't go out there mowing grass on the weekends. I need you, and I can pay you. And once you do that, they believe you. So
Right.
That's great stuff. That's great stuff. Well, Jefferson, I appreciate it. Where can people find you, or how can they contact you? What information you want to share on that?
Sure. So our website is simply parkavenuepartners.com. And I think there's a sign up link for our mailing list right at the very top center of the website. Honestly, we don't email probably even once a month on average, but that'll keep folks in the loop on our deals and the upcoming fund. You can also email me, just fill out the form. Also, I think that towards the bottom of that homepage. And then as you mentioned, I did also start the industry's first mobile home park podcast called Mobile Home Park Investors. And folks can find that and our LinkedIn group simply by going to mobilehomeparkinvestors.com.
That's great. How many episodes are you up to on your podcast? I haven't stayed up on it, I have to admit. But
I think we've gotten to 121. Wow. So about 100 hours of content up there. We've got a range of folks. We actually, sort of the biggest name, we actually interviewed Jim Clayton.
Oh, really?
Obviously of Clayton Homes, the guys we think a billionaire, sold his business to Warren Buffett.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a good interview with him up there. And then various other folks that, are mortgage brokers, designers of mobile home parks. There's also just a fair amount of content and war stories from our experience, finding, diligencing of parks and hiring people and going through all that you have to go through in the trenches to be in this business.
All right. Well, great. I appreciate your help and your insights today, Jefferson. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Ferd. Bye-bye.